At this time, I will now turn this webinar over to Matt for us to begin.
Hey guys, good morning. My name is Matthew Viveros. I'm a business consultant here with BACP in the Public Way Use Unit. I review these Sidewalk Cafe applications, and we're going to go over some slides, some information requirements on applying for and operating the Sidewalk Cafe. Okay, so just a quick overview. Some things we're going to touch on is the Sidewalk Cafe overview, some eligibility requirements, some operating requirements and details, kind of taking a look at some setups between building side and curbside sidewalk cafes, and then just the overall general sidewalk cafe application process. So the Sidewalk Cafe permit issued by BACP enables brick and mortar retail food establishments and tavern licensees to set up tables and chairs on the sidewalk, allowing them to serve patrons directly in front of or next to their establishments. So some eligibility requirements: applicants must have a valid retail food establishment license or an active tavern license. Just so you guys know quickly, if you guys have started the application process before, maybe run into some issues as to why things aren't getting processed. A lot of the times, if you've begun the Sidewalk Cafe application process, but can't get anywhere, a lot of times the retail food establishment license or tavern license either isn't linked correctly, or the license might not be active. So if you guys ever have any questions at any point, do not hesitate to reach out to us here at Public Way Use. The email, publicwayuse@cityofchicago.org, is where we'll answer any questions, kind of any one-offs and things like that. So the next point: applicants intending to serve liquor at a Sidewalk Cafe must have a valid liquor license. And the liquor liability insurance, dram shop insurance, is also what it's known as, per Sidewalk Cafe rules and regulations. Applicants that have only a tavern license must have a food service partner. Again, this is for a Sidewalk Cafe, meaning food is required. Sidewalk cafes must be located on the sidewalk. So specifically for this permit, again, sidewalk cafes cannot extend into the parkway, streets, empty lots, or other off-sidewalk areas. Sidewalk cafes must have a boundary, a continuous boundary that fully encloses the permitted area and separates the area from the remainder of the public way, with exception of the entrances. So a lot of times when I'm reviewing applications and I'm looking at site plans, one thing I'm looking for is to make sure that the barriers are continuous. And again, making sure that the entrances are in compliance. It's in kind of like our handbook, but the entrances, max 2 entrances per area. And then again, to be in compliance, those entrances have to be at 3-foot minimum and 5-foot maximum opening. So let's see, sidewalk cafes must be positioned to allow for a 6 feet clearance for pedestrians along the sidewalk. Again, when I look at the sidewalk cafes, we want to see any obstructions in the public way in addition to the sidewalk cafe where it's located, mailboxes, fire hydrants, lampposts, things like that. And also just making sure that all throughout the entire length of the sidewalk cafe, whether it's building side or curbside, that there is a continuous 6 feet of clearance for pedestrians along that walkway. So regarding extensions, sidewalk cafes that extend on a portion of the sidewalk in front of a neighboring business must be clearly indicated on the applicant's approved plan submitted as a part of the sidewalk cafe application. So such extended cafes may only extend in front of a single neighboring property. It cannot be another retail food establishment or retail liquor establishment. So if extending on the property side, this is important as far as documentation. So if you're extending your sidewalk cafe on the property side next to another business, again, that does not have an active retail food establishment license or retail liquor establishment license, you guys have to submit a letter to the application detailing that you have let the neighboring business owner or the building owner know that you are extending in front of their property. Again, the insurance required for the cafe must cover the entire footprint of the cafe. We'll go over what that looks like in a slide later, but essentially just making sure that the extended address is also included in the description of operations. And again, a full list of requirements and application instructions can be found by clicking on the Sidewalk Cafe icon on the website provided at the bottom of this slide. Okay, so some requirements. Sidewalk cafes must be located again on the sidewalk. There's other instances we'll get into later where some other cafes or patios, as we refer them to, are located. But again, sidewalk cafes cannot extend into the parkway, streets, empty lots, or other off sidewalk areas. Sidewalk cafes specifically must have a boundary that fully encloses the permitted area and separates the area from the remainder of the public way, with the exception of the entrances. Again, entrances are to be between a minimum of 3 feet and a maximum opening of 5 feet. These measurements obviously have to be notated on the site plan during the application process. Sidewalk cafes must be positioned to allow for a 6 feet clearance for pedestrians along the sidewalk. Sidewalk cafes must be positioned no closer than 1 foot to the curb. A lot of times when I'm reviewing applications and I'm looking at the site plan, I'm always refer to this as the curb clearance. So the minimum curb clearance is going to be 1 foot. Sidewalk cafes may extend in front of one immediately adjacent non-retail food or liquor establishment. Again, there's a couple examples we'll show here that kind of detail the property lines and which way the sidewalk cafe can extend to. Permittees may not alter any city property on the public way, trees, signs. Again, also your sidewalk cafe barriers cannot encapsulate anything that needs to be accessible to the public. So benches, bus. So if you're, for example, a sidewalk cafe that is curbside closest to the street, it cannot be in a bus stop area. Again, the public has to have access to stand in that area waiting for the bus. And then one of the last requirements, BYOB is not permitted in sidewalk cafes. Okay, so looking at an example of a building or business side sidewalk cafe, you can see this does a really good job of showing you kind of some of the basic requirements that we have here. For me, what's really important is, as you can see, there's bike racks, there's garbage cans, fire hydrants, street posts, street signs. So you look on the right side. But a good thing this does also, this isn't the site plan, this is just like a temporary drawing. But when I'm looking at the site plan to notate, if you are extending, as you can see on the left part of this diagram, there's a dotted line that breaks up the neighboring applicant property. So essentially making sure that, as you can see on the left, it extends over past that property line, and on the right, it does not. So on site plans, again, just making sure that whatever address you're extending in front of, you also detail those property lines. That makes it easier for me to go ahead and just look at the insurance and make sure that you're not extending more than one neighboring address, because again, per ordinance, you can only extend over to one neighboring address. Again, that does not have a retail food establishment license or a tavern liquor license. The next slide, you'll see it's the same thing. It just jumps over to the curb. So you see, again, some of the requirements here, and then just added is the 1 foot curb clearance, as you can see on the left. And again, one thing I want to point out here with the sidewalk cafe being curbside, you can see the walkways, not the sidewalks, but specifically the walkways coming from the street. You cannot extend that sidewalk cafe into those areas where obviously ADA accessibility would need that little ramp from the street going into the sidewalk. Okay. Now going over the application, applicants are expected to provide the following. So a valid active retail food establishment or tavern license. Applicant information just includes contact information, email, phone number. If you guys are applying, it's a lot of times easy for me to give you a call if I have any additional questions. So making sure that the number you guys do input, if you do represent a restaurant, that if you can make it a personal number, that would be a lot easier for me. So I can go ahead, give you a call and kind of make any clarifications or answer any questions a little bit more clearly that might not be captured in the log of the application. Again, photographs. Photographs, what we look at specifically is going to be the image of the storefront, as well as where the cafe space is going to occupy. We want to make sure that there's not going to be any kind of obstructions. Again, we want to make sure that we're capturing if there's a bus stop, if there's additional street signs, we want to make sure that we're seeing all of that so that way we can process the sidewalk cafe application correctly. General liability insurance, again, with proper liability amounts. Again, in the next slides, there's going to be some examples. We'll go over that. Obviously notating that the city is the additionally insured on the endorsement. And then again, if you do have liquor for your retail food establishment, just making sure that that's notated on the certificate of insurance as well. For extended cafes along the building side of the sidewalk, again, just going back to the letter that needs to be written to that neighboring building owner or property owner. The letter, proof of notice to the neighboring property owner and business, that needs to be attached to the application as well. Okay, this is a site plan. This is a really good example of kind of what we're looking for. If we think back to the samples that we were building curbside, sidewalk cafes, and kind of where they're located, just making sure that you're listing everything, all the public way obstacles from the parking meters to the lampposts, and more importantly, detailing the measurements between all of those sidewalk obstructions. We want to make sure, again, 6 feet minimum clearance between the outermost point of the barrier closest to that public way obstruction. And again, just some key notations to include when you're looking at this site plan. The cafe length and width dimensions. A lot of times I get questions in regards to, why does a sidewalk cafe cost this much? And again, it comes down to square footage. Here in the site plan example, you're going to see the cafe seating layout, the space the cafe occupies in correlation within the property lines and street. Here, if you're taking a look at the business, you'll see that the sidewalk cafe falls within one address. So it's not extending because the property lines do not distinguish an extension. Again, detailing all the obstacles in the public way and their measurements, their clearance measurements, ensuring 6 feet minimum is met. ADA seating is required per cafe section area. So for example, if this cafe section was split up because maybe of a side entrance, each section of the cafe needs to have at least 5% of ADA seating accessible. The cafe entrance and the opening measurement, you'll see kind of to the right side of the site plan, there's a 3.5 foot opening clearance. Again, that entrance clearance is going to be a 3 foot minimum to a 5 foot maximum opening. And then additional details will be required on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, there's always going to be one-offs. There's always going to be certain situations. But in that instance, you can email the publicwayuse@cityofchicago.org email, or since you guys would have that site plan and everything submitted already in the application, the best way for us to communicate is actually going to be through the log. The log you want to maintain throughout the entire application process until the permit is paid for and active. There's a lot of questions that are always going to come up on my end, on the applicant's end. So just making sure that that log is utilized throughout the entire process. Okay, so looking at the Sidewalk Cafe liability insurance, the sample on the left is the Sidewalk Cafe with no liquor. All the requirements on all three of these examples are detailed in blue. So I always recommend taking a picture or saving these images and sending them to the insurance provider, letting them know that these are the requirements that need to be met. Additionally, the major thing that we look at when we're reviewing the insurance is if you look towards the bottom of the certificate of insurance on the left side without the liquor, it's going to be the same for with liquor, but just for example, you'll see in the description of operations towards the bottom. That field also needs to detail, in addition to this blue field that's here already, it needs to additionally detail for the Sidewalk Cafe and then at whatever the address is of where the Sidewalk Cafe is going to be. Again, if it's extended, that address needs to be included in that field as well. So with restaurants or taverns that have liquor, you'll see on the right in the body of the insurance towards the bottom, it'll say list liquor liability here. That field is just going to be placed. If you look on the example on the far left, that's just going to be on the same certificate. It'll be included there as well. Usually the policy numbers are going to be the same, so that way everything reflects the same policy number when you look at the policy endorsement that's listed here in the slide in the middle between these two examples. Okay, so for the sidewalk application process, to begin that, it is different than the Chicago Business Direct site that we have. I know that's a lot of confusion we get sometimes, but you want to apply at ipi.cityofchicago.org/profile. This portal really helps us in the efficiency and effectiveness of completing the Sidewalk Cafe permits. The turnaround time is very quick, usually between a day. I'll get back to you. So just making sure that you guys are really utilizing the log so that way if you guys have any questions or if I need anything in addition to what's initially been provided, we can communicate through that log. So of course, you guys want to create an account. You guys want to begin the application process. You're going to use the portal to check on the permit status. So some application steps here. Applications will not be reviewed until all required documents are uploaded. So if some documents are missing upon the creation of the actual Sidewalk Cafe application, the application is not going to be ready for review. So essentially, it's not even going to come into my review queue that I get. So what you want to do is if you have some issues, you do want to reach out to publicwayuse@cityofchicago.org. And then that way, obviously, because at that point, the permit number is not going to be created, someone will reach out to you here from Public Way, and we can go ahead and assist with either getting that application started and fully completed so that way it's in my review queue and I can go ahead and begin that review process. So once the application is completed and submitted, check the online log for any required changes or additional documents needed to complete the application. Once all necessary reviews have been approved, the applicant will be prompted to pay for the Sidewalk Cafe permit. It's actually really great. You can pay for the permit online, and then also too, you're going to want to print out the permit from the portal, which is here in step 4, and display it along the Sidewalk Cafe, or you could put it on the exterior wall or window of the main entrance to the establishment. So if you need copies or anything like that, you can actually print that out from the portal in the attachments of the application. So some things to remember again, Sidewalk Cafe permits have a 12-month term and must be applied for and issued every year. We open up the renewal applications in January so that way, if you guys want to get ahead, January 1st is when we go ahead and open up the queue so that you guys can apply for the Sidewalk Cafes. The annual non-refundable Sidewalk Cafe permit fees vary depending on the size and location of the Sidewalk Cafe. However, the minimum Sidewalk Cafe permit fee is $600. Again, kind of just going back to when we were looking at the examples of the site plan, you guys want to be as accurate as possible with your square footage so that way we can make sure we bring you the most calculated and correct fee for your Sidewalk Cafe permit. If there's any city debt or account hold, any city debt or business account hold must be resolved prior to the issuance or renewal of any public way use permit. If you have a business license, you might be familiar with any holds will hold up the process in any kind of application or permit application as well. Okay, so just kind of touching up on some other outdoor dining categories. Beyond Sidewalk Cafes, there are 2 types of outdoor dining permits. So this doesn't fall within us here at Public Way. This is actually issued by the Chicago Department of Transportation and valid on an annual basis from May 1st through October 31st. Again, this is, if it's not a Sidewalk Cafe and it's outdoor dining, it's actually done by the Chicago Department of Transportation. So those 2 types are going to be a full street closure, which allows 3 or more restaurants and bars to close a block for dining in the street, or curb lane closures, which allows a restaurant or bar to place tables and chairs within a fixed boundary so patrons can dine in the curb lane. One thing that's not allowed is going to be closing out the entire sidewalk and having pedestrians walk in the street. That's no longer allowed. That is different than curb lane closures. But for more information, you do want to reach out to chicago.gov/outdoor dining and click on the full street closure or curb lane closure tiles. So for questions regarding any kind of full street closures, curb lane closure permits, email CDOT at cdotpermitsupport@cityofchicago.org. And then just some more information for Sidewalk Cafes. You can visit chicago.gov/outdoor dining and click on the Sidewalk Cafe tile. And then again, if you guys have any questions about your Sidewalk Cafes or permits in general, you want to email us here at BACP at publicwayuse@cityofchicago.org. And that's going to be it. We can leave it open for any questions. Okay. Okay, I see a question here. Can you speak to having a pergola above the Sidewalk Cafe? So pergolas are going to be a separate permit. It's something that's not going to fall within the Sidewalk Cafe application. That's a good question because to point out, and hopefully this can answer some other questions as well. Anything that is not the actual Sidewalk Cafe square footage itself. So if it's a separate planter, as far as not a hanging planter on the barriers, that is something that is required. A planter off to the side by itself is going to be a separate permit. A pergola, again, is going to be a separate permit that's not going to be approved within the Sidewalk Cafe application. Lighting, I know lighting, strung lighting is another one. Just to notate that permits for lighting, lighting across the sidewalk, if the Sidewalk Cafe is curbside, is actually not allowed. So one thing you want to make sure too is that when you're submitting the Sidewalk Cafe site plan, you are only submitting the site plan for the Sidewalk Cafe, because again, nothing else will be reviewed, only the Sidewalk Cafe. No other permits within that application will be approved. So hopefully that answers your question. I saw another question. Yes, the slides will be made available later. And then that way you can have access to all these links, some of these slides as well that provide some of the information about Sidewalk Cafes. A is the reference to the 5% requirement allocation related to 5% of the cafe's square footage or 5% of the proposed number of seats within cafe space. That is going to be, the 5% is going to be just of the outdoor dining. So you just want to make sure, again, per cafe space area, again, if it's broken up into multiple areas, you do want to have an ADA seating in each cafe section. But again, on the site plan, it does need to be detailed as well. That, for example, if there's 50 seats, at least 5% of those seats need to be designated for ADA seating. Let's see here. If we're looking to do a sitting area in our parking lot, does that require city permits? That's not going to be a Sidewalk Cafe permit. That is an instance where you want to reach out to Chicago Department of Transportation and apply for their permit that they require for that. Here, we're going to keep these questions specifically for Sidewalk Cafes. So I'm looking here, what are the rules for using patio heaters in outdoor dining spaces? So one of the major things is as far as storing propane tanks and having clearance. Anytime there's any kind of heaters outside, obviously, if you want to have outdoor dining when it's a little bit colder, you can have outdoor heaters. Again, if the heater is electric and it's going to be on the curb side, you cannot have any kind of power or gas lines running from across the property to the heater. That's again on the other side, across from the building in the on the curb Sidewalk Cafe. You cannot have any power lines. You cannot have any gas lines running that way. If you have any kind of propane tank heaters or anything like that, you need to have a 3-foot radius clearance. No furniture, no seating within a 3-foot radius from that heater. A recording of today's session will be made available, and you can go ahead. It will be linked and on YouTube as well. Let me see here. We extending to a neighboring business. You need to enclose it and make it permanent. No, you cannot make a Sidewalk Cafe permanent. So this is a big one that we get all the time. It needs to be noted that Sidewalk Cafes need to be easily removable. That's why when you look at the ordinance, the height of the barrier needs to be between 27-inch minimum for cane detection, as well as a 3-foot maximum height. But essentially, you cannot have any permanent structures at the end of the day, as long as the Sidewalk Cafe barriers are easily removable and again within that height requirement, then that is acceptable. But again, no permanent structures will be permitted in the Sidewalk Cafe application. So let's see if there's anything else. Let's go here. You can run your Sidewalk Cafe all year round. Essentially, you just want to make sure that you obviously have an active permit and you're staying up to date with it. Again, just a notation too, other permits are usually a span of 5 years. A Sidewalk Cafe permit is annual. It is not every 5 years like some of the other permits. A Sidewalk Cafe permit lifespan is of 1 year. And again, that application renewal process can be begun on January 1st. So I think, let's see. Yeah. Any other questions? When
Matt,
extending,
do you have the questions in the chat?
Are you the only?
yeah, I'm looking at them right now.
Okay.
So when extending to a neighboring property, can you just add tables or do they need to be enclosed? You absolutely have to have, just to consider it an extension of your Sidewalk Cafe. So the barriers have to be around it. If you're going to have another entrance in front of the neighboring property with your Sidewalk Cafe extension, it does have to have the barriers. And then if you're going to have any kind of opening, everything still applies. You still need 3-foot minimum to 5-foot maximum entrance opening. The barriers, again, cannot be permanent and cannot exceed a height of 3 feet. So yes, that answers that question there. So I think we'll end it there on the questions. And again, if there's anything, any kind of one-off situations, do not hesitate to send us an email or just respond in the log. You can ask any questions you guys have in the log, in the application, or again, at publicwayuse@cityofchicago.org.
Thank you, Matt, for your presentation today on sidewalk cafes and how to apply and obtain the permits. To learn more about this program, please send an email to bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. Again, that's bacpoutreach@cityofchicago.org. To learn and become a part of the BACP Entrepreneur Certificate Program, please visit chicago.gov/BACP certificate. Again, that's chicago.gov/BACP certificate. To learn more about our upcoming webinars, please visit chicago.gov/business education. Again, that's chicago.gov/business education. Thanks again to today's presenter, and thank you for joining us. See you next time.